Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. This week we're having a look at something that's more of a tool than it is a plugin. And the reason that is because it runs independently. It doesn't need to run inside of a DAW or any other software. It just runs straight from your desktop. And it's called Expose by Mastering the Mix. So this is a new tool that's been released by Mastering the Mix recently. Previously, I had done knowledge sessions on their reference tool, which I really love and I purchased. And now we're looking at this one, which is another new one. So they're really focusing obviously on the mastering side of things and checking that your files and songs are good to go before you release them. So with this one here, we're doing some basic checks, and I'm going to show you what they are. Now, before we go into that, I just want to clear up that this tool should be used as a guide and should not be used as a set rule. Okay, because I'll show you with real reference material what this tool shows you. So just because it gives you some clues to say that there's problems does not mean that they're actually problems. You need to work that out yourself, and it's just a guide. But it can be a very useful tool just for comparing and just to expose potential issues and to make you think about, have you done the right thing? Should you relook at your song before you release it? That's really all that you should be using this for, is just to double check and let you think, and even you can compare to other songs to see where your levels are and that sort of stuff. So as I said, it's sort of an application tool. So you run it straight from your desktop, and as you open it, this is what you get. Very basic layout, nothing really to say much here. You've got a license here that you can unlock, help, that'll open a manual. You've got a settings thing here. So you've got all of these presets that are already done. So you've got some mixing presets, you've got some mastering presets, broadcast, and then user ones, so you can create your own levels. And it's a matter of going through each of these items and setting an appropriate value. So you'll see as I change the preset, they will change values. So right now we're just going to work with the inbuilt ones, and those presets are shown down here. So you can click on that and then scroll to the exact preset that you want to load, or you can just flick through with the arrow keys to get to where you want to be. So let's say we want to be on mastering CD, and we basically just drop files into here. We can drop one file or we can drop many. So let's say I want to grab 3 files. So you'll see it's analyzing the song and it's coming up with some information here. Here's our song here visually, and here's our values for each of these songs. Now we can adjust this window, so that's good. We can make it bigger, smaller, however you want to, but we could fit all the songs in. And again, like I said, the presets are designed for depending on what you're doing. So if you are not mastering your own music and you are mixing it and you output your mix and you want to send it to a mastering engineer, then you might use a preset from the mixing selection here to make sure there's no obvious issues from your mixes before you send them to a mastering engineer. If you're mastering your own music, then obviously you can look at these and you can check what it's going to look like, or any errors that are going to come up based on where you plan to put this music. So to run through the selections here, you can get tooltips on each one of these, but the first one here is basically showing us our loudness. So the top one, the int, is our integrated LUFS, and the ST is our short-term LUFS. Then we have our peak. So this is sort of like a true peak measure. So, well, this one here is definitely true peak. So it's true peak measured in decibels, true peak. And then the dB one is just sample peak measured in decibels. Next, we have our stereo field. So we have our left-right stereo spread heat map, they refer to it as. And then below that, we have our phase correlation heat map. Next, we have our dynamic range. So the top one is our short-term dynamic range, and the bottom one is our loudness range. And this stating is measured in loudness units. Okay, so each of these settings and each of these items, you can get a good description from their manual, but to give you a brief overview, to save you reading them, the integrated LUFS it's a calculation of the loudness for the entire track. So it analyzes the entire song and it does a sort of an averaging calculation of what the loudness of the song is. Whereas the short term is a calculation that's done over 3-second snapshots. So it doesn't quite state it in the manual, but I'm assuming that it's calculating the loudest part in your song. So the loudest 3-second snapshot that it detected through your song to give you that figure. Okay, so the two peak settings here, let's start with the bottom one. This is your standard peak setting. So if you were playing your audio in your DAW and you were seeing a peak meter and you were seeing the very top figure that was being displayed on that would be this number here. So this is just a general standard peak reading of the highest point of your waveform. This one here is so it's referred to as true peak or intersample peak. And what it refers to is, again, look at the manual. They've got a nice picture of this. When you convert digital back to analog, what happens is that if you have the signal very high, because a digital signal is sort of a flat, like a square wave type shape, when you go back to analog, it needs to put a round on it. It needs to round it off to make it more look like a sine wave. And what that does is it usually can go above the line. And what that means is that if this was sitting at 0, which is, let's say, the absolute maximum you can go to, the intersample peak or the true peak could actually be above 0. So you'll see here that we have a peak of -1, but we have a true peak of -0.88. So it's actually going a little bit over our peak value. So you just need to be aware of that because, again, like I said, in our case here, we've got plenty of room because I've got my peak sitting at -1. But if that was sitting at 0, then that would actually be going over 0 and we would start to get distortion and clipping. With the stereo spread here, this left and right setting is basically showing you where your track is most prominently positioned. So in this case here, it's sitting in that range here. This one here, it's sitting basically dead center. And this one here again is in the center. So it's trying to show you if your mix is lopsided at all, if it's leaning more to the left or to the right or in the center. And the correlation heat map, again, the same thing, but again, this one is with correlation now. So we're talking about phase, and we want to be sitting over the +1 side. Anything going over to the -1 side is going to be giving you a lot of out of phase information, which is not going to be good. So the next setting here, I guess, is the most controversial one. This is dynamic range. It's sort of trying to indicate how much dynamics are in your song from the lowest point to the highest point, that sort of measurement. Now, the top one here, dynamic range, they're stating that they've calculated it from using a ratio of the short term LUFS over here and the peak level here. And they're using an RMS, so they're doing an average of that. So they're trying to show you how much dynamics is in your mix between the sort of between the low and the very peaks of the song, or from the average to the very peaks, to show how dynamic your music is. So the second one here is loudness range or loudness units. It's trying to give you a measurement of the loudness variation of your entire track. It's looking at the entire song and it's trying to work out the differences in volumes between the different areas, so the verses, choruses, whatever sections, and trying to indicate the loudness range there. Now, with both of these settings, the lower the number, the less dynamics you have. The higher the number, the more dynamics you have. We have a look at this song here. Basically, our loudness section here is all good. So what we're looking for is, in this case here, anything that comes up red, they're indicating is an issue. And this is going to be based on the settings that are applied to the preset. So if you constantly like running your mixes, your masters hotter, then you can create your own user one with a setting that you're more happier with to make sure that you're in the ballpark. So this is their suggestions for what you should have for mastering a CD. So in this case here, we're good on the loudness, we're good on the peak, we're good on the stereo field, and we've got some red on the dynamic range. If we look at our second track here, very similar approach here, except in this case here, we're saying our integrated LUFS is a little bit too hot. So it's not a good setting here. And you can see the numbers here. We've got minus 7.2 short term on this one, minus 8.1 integrated. This one here, we've got minus 10.5 integrated. And then the third one again, we got lower. So this one we're saying is running a lot hotter. And you can also tell that by the dynamic range. It is quite a bit hotter, this song. Now, to narrow down what we're looking at with these, we can actually click on any one of these items and it will show us the waveform with that setting. So these ones were obviously all good. And this one here, it shows us all the sections of the song that have this issue. So you'll see here, this little tiny section here passes in for the dynamic range. This part has the most dynamics and the rest of the song doesn't. If we click it again, we go back to the full picture. So to give you a better idea of that here, because these ones don't really have too much issues other than it's saying the dynamic range is too compressed. We can click on this one here, but unfortunately it also shows us that basically the whole song, except for the very start, does not have a problem. Now, if we want to analyze the problem, so let's say we found a little section, we can come across with our cursor onto the waveform here, find the section, and you'll see it's got a play symbol. So if we actually hold our mouse button down, we can actually play the song. Now you have to hold it down. So if I just click, it just does that. So you have to hold it down. So if we found that we had a little problem somewhere in the song, we could click on it, play it to just have a listen to see what we think of that problem. Now, we can scroll through these presets and you'll see here, this error here disappears when I go to club. So when I go to club, it's saying it's okay. And you'll also see here, the dynamic range on all of these is now passing. The loudness is still not. But then if we go to something like Apple Music, suddenly we've got more errors. So we've got a lot of these loudness errors. We've got these true peak errors. So if we click on one of these, you'll see here, this sections here are good. The end is good, but all of these ones here have some true peak issues. So this is a good example here. You'll see that when I click on the true peak indicator here, it's very scattered. It's not the whole song. It's only all of these little sections here. So to give you an example of some other sort of issues here, I've got another song here that I've brought up, and you'll see here again, we've got some issues that it's stating on the loudness. Again, true peak issues through the entire song. Our DR, again, it's a bit too high. In this case here, we've also got red on our stereo field and our correlation meter. Now, if we click on that, because you might look at that and go, oh, that's a problem. You know, that shouldn't be there. What are we going to do? But if I click on it, you'll see here, it's just this tiny little bit at the start. That's it. The rest of the song is fine. But what you'll notice is if I play this, and this is why you need to check it, is that this section here has a piano, which has a lot of reverb and a lot of sort of delay effect on it. It's very ambient. And the way it was done, obviously, has a little bit of an issue with the correlation and a little bit of lopsidedness with the stereo field. So that's the only issue this meter here has. So in this case here, you could go and try and fix that if you wanted to, or you could say, well, I don't actually care. So that's why I'm saying you need to analyze, look at it, and then check, because you could just say, oh, that's fine, ignore that. These other ones you might not want to ignore. You might want to take them down a bit. You might want to tame it. Maybe these are all a little bit too hot, but then again, maybe they're not. So just to give you an example here, I have now loaded up 2 actual songs from the radio. You can see the names here. Okay, these are mixed, mastered by professionals, and here's how they have done it. Okay, and you'll see that this one here, we got our integrated loudness is quite good. This song here, Uptown Funk, was mastered quite low, and it's very balanced, this one. The dynamic range on it is really good. But if we click on it, obviously the end sections here gets a little bit hot on the end sections. No big deal, really. What's funny here is that we have our peak set to -0. So whereas my masters were set to -1 to allow for Apple Music, because Apple Music likes -1, these tracks here are just gone straight to -0. And you'll see here, see the intersample peak here, or the true peak has gone into a plus number, 0.19. So it is actually technically going into distortion. Our phase and stereo spread's good, but our dynamic range, again, in this case, is complaining a little bit. So especially this back half. So the front part's good. Okay, but the song here, you can see, even just looking at the waveform, it's quite flat in spots. It's definitely been chopped, like limited. And you can see here the integrated loudness and the short-term loudness is quite high. Again, we've got it to 0, and the peak, true peak, is going over. So it would be clipping and distorting. For some reason, okay, so it was indicating an error that it's slightly left lopsided, but again, it's only in these little parts, so I wouldn't worry about that. But in this case here, the dynamic range is 5.6 DR, which is pretty low. And that's quite a lot of the song, and you can tell that by these flat lines that it's, it's not very dynamic in that point. And even when we move it over to club, we're going over with the peak here. We are getting under the DR now for club, so that's good in that regard. So you need to make your own determination of where you want to go with this and what settings, because you can see even the most popular music on the radio today still comes up with errors in this thing. So you need to make a call at where you want to set these to, what you want to set your reference as, and you could, I guess, create your own custom user profiles to suit these values and where you think it's appropriate to go with this. So check the plugin out. You can get a 15-day trial. Definitely have a play with it, see what you think. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.